So this is it, the big year, everybody, the countdown to COP26. We've got an international government process. We've got a race to zero. We're going to dig into that. But I just want to start with what's at stake, because I don't know about you guys, but in the last week, what I've seen is a UNFCCC synthesis report that says we're nowhere on track with national commitments, and an additional report that came out today from the IEA that pointed out that emissions went up in 2020 after all. What's going on? This isn't how it was supposed to happen.
No, it's like the cars are moving in the wrong direction of the race, right? Whoa, wait a minute. U-turn here. This is totally the wrong direction. So yeah, two reports, one after the other, with very bad news. So what does it take? You know, what is the information that is being reflected by those reports, and what can change both on the part of governments as well as on the part of everyone else? Civil society, finance institutions, corporations, everyone has got to get moving, in fact, flying in the right direction, which is toward decarbonizing. And that is one of the very important goals of COP26 for everyone to come to show. It's a show and tell. How much have we decarbonized, and how much more are we going to decarbonize in the next 5 to 10 years? Those commitments are absolutely key to having any chance of addressing climate change in a timely fashion.
The first trip I did, almost a year ago actually, in this role before I went full-time, was to New York, to the UN. And I met a lot of the perm reps, and I remember one particular meeting really vividly. And we were sitting with the perm reps from the small island developing states, from some of the developing nations, and we were going around the table, and I was asking each of them, what does climate change mean for you? And we got to the perm rep for one of the small island developing states, and she said, you know, if we don't fix this, I'm not going to have a place to call home. And that was the point at which, very early on in this role, that it brought it home to me just how stark this is for very many people who weren't necessarily responsible for creating the situation we're in, but are actually at the front line. You know, I'm taking the same message to all governments consistently around the world. And there are 4 things that we want to ensure that we achieve on the road to enact COP. The first is that we are asking all governments to come forward with ambitious targets to reduce emissions in the near term, those 2030 nationally determined contributions, and allied with that, to also commit to going to net zero. The good news is that we've got 70% of the global economy already covered by net zero targets, but we want to see more people move in that direction. And this is really vitally important if we want to ensure that we keep the goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees within reach. The second thing that we're very keen to see is more money, more finance flowing towards climate action. People will know that there was a commitment made by donor countries that by 2020, $100 billion would be deployed in supporting developing countries and supporting vulnerable countries. We need to make sure that we deliver on this. And this is absolutely a matter of trust for very many countries that I talk to around the world. And it is an onus on donor nations to make sure we deliver on this. And of course, at the same time, to see how we can get more private finance flowing as well. Our third ask of governments is to make sure that they set out clear adaptation plans and their adaptation communications to show how they're going to cope and deal with the climate change that's already happened. And the fourth element of what we are asking for is to ensure that collectively we can make progress on the outstanding issues in the Paris Rulebook. So whether it's Article 6 or common timeframes or transparency, there'll be a range of issues that we need to make sure we collectively deliver on at Glasgow. And underlying all of this, we are running 5 campaigns. The first is to ensure that we have a transition to clean energy around the world. Second is to make sure that we're pushing the agenda when it comes to zero-emission vehicles. Thirdly, nature-based solutions. Fourthly, adaptation resilience, which is so important for very many countries. And fifth, finance, which ties all of this together. And I hope that if we are able to do this and we have governments and we have non-state actors along the road with us, we will find success at COP26.
Minister, if I can say, you do inspire real confidence, certainly me, hearing you talk. But you are the incoming president of the COP, which means that you'll be looking at things from a kind of global perspective. If I can invite you to, almost feel free to speak in global terms, and I'm going to ask the silly question that a lot of our plain-speaking listeners might well wonder. Governments all around the world have taken huge action on COVID. How do governments kind of act to lock down on carbon? How do we find that same force and energy?
Paul, you're right. And it's been a really difficult year. I mean, before I went full time, I was the business minister in our government. We deployed, along with lots of other governments around the world, significant financial support for businesses, for jobs, for people's livelihoods. And that was absolutely the right thing to do. But the interesting thing, I think, with this is that we are at this point where we're going to have to recover. And I think that actually, and you're seeing this in the statements that are being made by governments around the world, is that they have understood that the way you recover and the way you recover better is by doing it in a green and sustainable way. And I think, for lots of people around the world, they will not be sort of focused, all the time on climate action issues. But I think what's important for us as part of the COP process and more generally is to connect with them and to demonstrate to people that actually having a green recovery, ensuring that our environment is getting better, is also consistent with an economic recovery and with value-added jobs, high productivity jobs in the future. And I just point at the UK, and other countries will have the same similar statistics, is that the last 30 years, we've managed to grow through successive governments, I would say, our economy by 75%, and yet we have cut emissions by 43%. I mean, green growth is absolutely possible. And I think that is what collectively through the G7, the G20, we all need to be pushing.
I cannot resist, Christiana, before we sign off, asking you a version of the question that we normally ask our guests, and we haven't had a chance to ask a guest this week. You have been in those seats. You've been the person who had the buck stops here written on your desk in the lead up to Paris. If you were sitting in that seat now, would you be feeling outraged about our lack of progress or optimistic about our chances?
As you well know, Tom, we were, hit by really bad reports the whole time that we were preparing Paris. And so the fact that these two last reports are such a deep hit should not take us by surprise, because we know that this is going to come. So what do we do with that information? We double down. Yeah. We double down and we go, something that begins with SH, and then we go, and therefore we are doubling down on this. There is no way that can then let us sit back, twiddle our thumbs, or cower back in fear. This is absolutely the moment to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps and double down on the efforts, because we have to do this. Failure is not an option.